Good evening, everyone. This is the Inland Wetlands Commission meeting in County Cleaning, March 20th. Sorry about that, March 20th. We are just getting set to go. And Angela, I believe you were all set. Everyone is admitted into the meeting as of right now.
Thank you. So good evening. This is Secretary Angela Jameson calling the meeting of the Inland Wetlands Commission, Monday, March 20th, 2023, to order at 6:03 p.m. Chair Dan Stepanek is joining us via Zoom, and he has asked that this meeting actually here in Town Hall.
Excuse me just a minute. There is some feedback, so anyone who does not have their laptop muted, including myself, me, unmuted.
I'm muted too. There we go.
Okay, is that better?
Okay, good. So could I hear a motion, please, for Chairperson Pro Tem?
I nominate Angela as the Pro Tem.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. All those in favor, please raise your hand.
Aye.
All those against? Carried unanimously. So now we need a Secretary Pro Tem, and I would like to nominate Commissioner Sanford as Secretary Pro Tem. Do we have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Commissioner Woike. All those in favor, please raise your hand.
Aye.
Aye. And all those against, please raise your hand. Seeing none, that was passed unanimously. So now I'd like to ask the Secretary Pro Tem, please, to call the roll.
Dan Stepanek.
Here.
George Perkins. He's here. Beth. Beth Brunelli.
Present.
Phyllis Loeb. Here. Katie Owsley.
I'm here, but I don't think I'm here yet officially.
You're here.
Okay.
You're here.
You're not seated.
Anthony Sillo.
Here.
And Angela Jameson.
Present.
And I am present here as well.
Good. Thank you very much, Secretary Pro Tem Sanford. So all the regular members are with us, so we don't need to appoint any alternates just yet. But just to let everybody know that when we do get to the item on 72 Hill Street LLC, Commissioner Brunelli has announced that she will recuse herself. And at that point, I would like to seat Commissioner Owsley in her place, but we'll get to that in just a little bit. So firstly, you have an agenda in front of you. Has anybody got any questions or about the agenda? If not, could I hear a motion, please, to approve it? Commissioner Woike, seconded by
Me.
Sanford. All those.
Okay. Aye.
Aye. All those against? The agenda has been approved unanimously. And now we're going to move on to approve the minutes of the regular meeting, February 27th, 2023. You have been sent that, and you should have that in front of you. Does anybody have any questions on those minutes? If no one has any comments, could I hear a motion to approve?
I'll make a motion to approve. This is Dan.
I'll second.
Thank you. All those in favor, please raise your hand. Aye. Anyone against?
I'm going to abstain as I was not present.
Thank you, Commissioner Brunelli. Noted. So the minutes for the regular meeting, February 27th, have been approved. And now let's do the minutes for the special meeting of March 1st. Anybody have any questions? If not, can I hear a motion to approve, please? Commissioner Sillo makes the motion. Who seconds?
I'll second.
Commissioner Sanford, although aye. And any abstentions? Commissioner Bernali is abstaining. Anyone against? No. So those minutes are approved. And then finally, we have the minutes of the special meeting, March 13th, 2023. Does anyone have any comments? Actually, I do. I believe I chaired that meeting.
Yes.
And Commissioner.
What happened?
I don't hear anything. Do you, Dan?
No, I do not, no.
Excuse me, the Wetlands Commission is muted on the Zoom call.
That's correct.
With it.
Okay, that should be better.
Okay, because everybody here, those of us at Town Hall, New Canaan.
Trying to manage 3 different so much.
So Dan Stepanek, can you hear us?
Yes, I can.
I can hear.
So I think we need to go back and have a motion to approve the minutes of the special meeting March 13th with the revision that I proposed. Could I have someone make the
Angela, we did not, I didn't hear your revision. I'm not sure if anybody else did.
So
Dan, did you?
The revision is that actually I was chair pro tem for that meeting, and Commissioner Sanford was secretary pro tem. I do have that right, don't I, Kathleen?
For the 13th?
13th, yes.
Yep.
So Kathleen Holland is going to make that that small administrative change.
Got it. Thank you.
Could I have a motion to approve those minutes, please? March 13th.
This is Dan. I'll make the motion.
Thank
to
you.
approve.
Dan. Second, please.
Second.
Very good. Thank you, Commissioner Sillo. All those in favor of approving the minutes with that revision? Thank you. Any abstentions? Commissioner Brunali is abstaining. Any votes against? No. So those minutes are approved.
One comment. Beth, in front of you is the minutes that you
I have
can
to
sign.
sign it.
You can sign page 3. I'll correct page 1. So that'll
Okay,
be no problem.
I'll do
If
that.
I can get your signature tonight, that'd be great. Angela, I think I gave you 2 sets in that folder there.
Yes, I will do that.
And if you can pass the official pen, don't, we have an official pen.
Okay.
So we'll
Why don't you have the official
we'll
pen
send
first,
the
and
official
then
town clerk pen down to
and
you.
then maybe you
this
could
is
send
nice.
it
I think
back
I'm
to me.
keeping it.
Thank you. Very good.
Thank you.
So now I think we're in a position to open the regular meeting. And first item in the regular meeting is to receive applications. But I believe there are no new applications to be received.
Correct.
Is that correct?
Yes.
Very good. So then we will move on to item 6 on the agenda. Application number 22-23-23, 128 Smith Ridge Road, Timothy J. Kurt and Donna Bisonet. Perform stream remediation, remove sediment and algae from stream channel by suction vacuuming, stabilize disturbances, replant embankments as needed. And the agents are Attorney Janet Brooks and George Logan, who is, I believe, a soil scientist.
George, you should be able to share your screen. This is Kathleen Holland talking for the record. You should just be able to go ahead and share your screen whenever you're ready to start your presentation, and perhaps Janet wants to kick it off.
Thank you, Kathleen, and thank you, members of the commission and members of the public who are present. My name is Attorney Janet Brooks. I represent Tim, Kurt, and Donna Bissonette, and I just wanted to correct the address is 1218 Smith Ridge Road in New Canaan, and this is on their residential property, a proposal to remediate and improve the water conditions on the stream as it is running through their property. It starts from outside their property and continues on further through a pond and later discharges further off their property, but this involves their property alone. And I think I'm actually going to ask George Logan to begin our presentation on the remediation. Thank you, George.
That'd be great. George Logan here for the record, soil wetland scientist, Rima Ecological Services out of Vernon, Connecticut. I'm going to share my screen. If I can find it. Here we go. Nope. Wait a minute. I apologize. Let's go to number one. Here we go. I thought I'd give you sort of a site locus, even though I'm sure everyone knows where this site is. Bottom right corner, right here is 1218 Smith Ridge Road. And under the little hand is the little section of 156 linear feet of watercourse that we would like to remediate. You can see where our neighbors are. This is Grace Farms. And you can't see, but I'll try to do this. So the watercourse starts apparently just over the state line in New York. It comes through some of these ponds that you see here, eventually comes down and meets our property boundary. And then after the 156 linear feet, it discharges into a man-made pond. And then of course it goes off-site there. The next exhibit is this. This was part of the packet and report that we submitted. This is just to show you that wetland and watercourse delineations were performed on the site. They were initially performed when, as you might recall, we came before this commission again for a restoration remediation along a swale that runs parallel to the property boundary. So the blue line indicates graphically where more or less the edge of the regulated resource is. And I think when we were out in the field, we were standing right about here on this little bridge and we were looking kind of north. And I think we pointed out to some pink and blue flags that were the delineation markers, if you will. So that's that. Now, we'll probably spend a whole bunch of time on this particular graphic, which is the overall stream habitat restoration plan. But I will defer to this in more detail a little later in my presentation. What I'd like to do is to show you that this is a plan that was the original plan that I think was back in 2000 and what does it say, 5 or 6, I believe, that our clients came before this commission to do an enhancement and restoration of the stream, which was done. It was a beautiful job, actually. I was pretty impressed with the original plan, and this is the plan. So what we've taken is we've taken this original plan that shows everything that we need to know about, and we've put the elements of the stream restoration sequence and all the other elements on this. So I will come back to this, but I just wanted to show you that I'm going to next come to this in a little more detail, which shows you, again, this is the top of it. I kind of zoomed it out a little bit so we can all see it. 5 sections that were pretty obvious and distinct. And then that was actually the way that the original enhancement was done. So 5 sections, each one a little bit different character. And we tied our inventory of what has happened to the stream in the intervening years. And then most recently, there's been, as you probably have seen already in the record, a increase of some sediment that has come into this 156 feet. So here's section 1, 2, and I'll describe those a little more, 3, 4, and 5. And then here's the bridge that some of us stood there last week and looked up. Now, one of the reasons for us doing this is that, as I mentioned, there has been a deposition of sediment, sand, coarse, and some silts within the watercourse, which has basically smothered the habitat, and it's resulted in a diminution of its quality as an aquatic habitat. Back in, I believe, in 2016 in July, and again, as this particular table shows, in November 30th of 2018, we came through and we actually looked very carefully at each of the sections, and we inventoried and cataloged the conditions within each section. We actually even took sediment samples and we sent them up to the Yukon soil laboratory, and we were interested in what the sediment sample texture would end up being. And also we looked at organic matter. And so here, what you see is, particularly what I've done is I've highlighted the stream bed substrate in the sand category in the column. You see section 1 has 65% of the substrate is sand as of 2018. And by the way, I should have said before that I did go back and inventory in July of 2022 these 7 sections, and pretty much found that the same conditions are pretty much the same. There's not much difference. The stream has sort of equalized, reached an equilibrium, and so the sediment deposits have really not moved since 18. Section 2, 15%. Section 3, not much. I'll explain why that is. And then, as you can see, section 4 and 5 have significant portions of sand within the brook. What's interesting also is the component of silt, which you would not be surprised to find it in the last segment, which is also a little deeper, as you can see, a 35% silt. Also, the organics are higher, 5.3%. And the reason for that is both sections 4 and 5 are the deeper sections of this watercourse habitat, and that's where a lot of this accumulation has taken place. And that's the area that we will talk about where the suction vacuuming is going to be employed. Another thing I need to mention is here's sediment depth averages across the entire section, but I highlighted the sediment depth maximum. So you can see a 7 and 8 inches maximum, and 1 and 2. And these are basically sand deposits that have been deposited here. Section 3, even though the average is pretty low, and I'll explain why that is, there's still some areas at the edges of section 3 which have 6 maximum. And actually, as you will see, in 2022, I noticed that it was actually up a little bit. And the other thing that I showed here in the right column is that one of the things that has happened as the result of this sedimentation of the silt and the sand that has come through, and a lot of the silt has moved through and either been deposited in sections 4 and 5 or actually has gone into the pond itself. But we're not requesting anything to be done at the pond at this time. But what I noted here is that there was algal scum and silt coatings of hard surfaces. And as you probably heard from other of my profession, when you get these silt coatings on hard surfaces and you get algal scum, because it's like a fertilizer basically, and you have sun exposure, what happens is you basically compromise the hard habitat and the aquatic habitat which the benthic organisms use. And there are benthic organisms that we have found within this segment, but obviously it has been compromised since the sedimentation has taken place.
George, may I just ask you to define what benthic organisms are?
Oh, yeah. So as you probably have heard, benthic organisms are the larval forms of aquatic insects. These are the ones that basically the eggs are deposited by the adults that are on wing most often. And then the larvae will spend their first instars, if you will, or the first few months, sometimes a little more than a year within the aquatic environment. And then they emerge as insects, basically as flying insects. So for instance, mayflies, stoneflies, caddisflies, true flies, and the like. Going on, I'm now going to show you some pictures. Section 1 is the one that's the most northerly. And as you can see here, we have a sort of a porous stone wall because the water flows through it. In most occasions, unfortunately, it also flows over it. So there is a little bit of a damming effect that happens here. This section is the one that is one of the most impacted immediately by two things. First, by sediment that has come in within the watershed from to the north of the wall. So we have sediment depositions here. This was originally made to have a deeper habitat as a sump, which I think it was a good idea. And the idea was if you have a deeper area that was up to 18 or 20 inches, that it would accumulate sediment that comes down, which is typically a natural phenomenon. Sometimes, obviously, there's an accelerated phenomenon due to things that are happening within the watershed. So in this section, you have sediment deposits. As I said, there are 12 inches or so. And what you see here in this stone is what has happened by the washing out of stone that was placed originally within that interfence swale that we came to you a few months back and got an approval to remediate that. So this is what has happened here, and this is just a picture. It's also further down below. You can see it in the photograph. So section 1. It looks pretty. Obviously, this is during a summer picture. I'm now at the end of section 1, and section 1 is right in here, just before these big boulders that you see. The thing you might notice, and maybe if I focus in a little bit, you might notice the algal scum and silk coatings that you see on the rocks. And that's one of the things that I was talking about. And
George, would you say which direction you're looking? Are you looking
yes,
north
and
or
looking
south?
downstream direction towards the south, and the pond is way back and at the far background. So this is end of section 1, and this is section 2 here. Again, looking southerly. I wanted to show you an example. This is in section 2. And this is my auger, and the auger head is about 8.5 to 9 inches. So this is what has happened. Some of the sediment that was in the center of the channel has been washed to the side, or has remained to the side. Well, the sediment that was in the center of the channel has going downstream and been washed in the sections 4 and 5, which are the deeper sections. But here's several examples of this sediment along, and this is a minor one. There's some other ones that are a little larger. This is section 3. So I'm standing in section 2 again, I'm looking northerly. So this is the end of section 3, and this is the beginning of section 3 up there. And this was specifically created as a kind of a riffle habitat. They try to create different types of habitats, so it's always a good idea. So There's actually a lot of insect activity that could happen here, obviously has been diminished. The problem with this particular section is that it has some of these cobbles. As you can see, the water's shallow and riding almost on top of them. This is during the summer, so not a lot of flow, but the rocks have been embedded. I wouldn't call it severe embeddedness, but there's at least moderate embeddedness. And it's very difficult without picking every single rock and washing it to remediate this. But we have a plan for this section also, which I will explain in a few moments.
George, could I ask you to explain what it means for the rock to be embedded?
So when the rocks get embedded, that means you are limiting the hard surface of the cobble that you see here, or the large rock, which is beneath the flow line. And that's the area, this hard surface below the flow line, where the macroinvertebrates, these benthic organisms, spend most of their time. So going on now, I've turned around from here, 180 degrees almost, and I'm looking again to down gradient. I'm actually further up, and this is still section 3. You remember the big rocks here? Let's go back one. Here's the big rocks. So I'm actually went up and stood here and looked down. There's the big rocks again. And there's a little bit of a step here. I don't know if you can see it. It's probably a little bit of a step by about a foot, maybe, or so, where the water cascades over into section 4. And then beyond that is section 5. And here, a little closer up during a fall, I guess, of sections 4 and 5. What happens here, these are wider sections, deeper sections, 5 more so than 4. Here's the split, if you will, between section 5 and section 4. You can see the pond in the way background. Here's a wetland boundary flag, by the way. And what happens is the flow of the stream comes through here, as you can see the running water, and then it meanders around this area that has a lot of sediment, silt, organics, comes around and goes back into the pond. So these are the 2 sections that have the most sediment. In section 5 in particular has been mixed up with more organics, as I showed in the table. Now, I'm going to go back here to this and focus in and show you a little bit of what we're doing. I think this should be okay. So here's the nuts and bolts of our. Now, as you can see, this doesn't show, it doesn't look too much like this, because this is what was being proposed back in 2006, whereas this is what existed there before, which was just a straight channel, a very uninteresting habitat entrained in narrow walls. And this was completely revamped. But this is the map that we have. So I just wanted to show you some of the access for the equipment and where the equipment will be sited and what we're actually doing. And all this is spelled, and I'm not going to read it all, but this is all spelled in sequence in this stream restoration sequence. All right. Sections 1, 2, and 3, which are from here to there, as you recall, what we're proposing is to use hand tools. So myself as a supervisor and my people that will be helping me are going to go in there, and we're going to basically remove the sediment deposits by hand, shovels, and then burlap bags with handles, and then we'll be taking them out, and I'll show you where we're going to take them out. But before that is even done, one of the primary things that has to happen, because the minute we start working in the watercourse itself and taking out sediment, there's going to be some slurry, some of the fines that are within even those sediment deposits that are mostly sandy. We don't want them to reach the pond. So we're going to have a silt boom that's going to be employed, typical, what you call a turbidity curtain sometimes, or a silt boom, at the entrance to the pond, so that it will not allow any fines, which were the ones that we will be most concerned to enter the pond. And that's going to be tied into the banks of the pond in both sides. And the silt boom is not the blue line, by the way. It's more the gray line. So it's going to be a semi crescent, if you will. So that's what's going to happening in sections 1, 2, and 3. However, in addition, section 3, we're going to do some minor power washing using a low pressure power washer to sort of clean the rocks a little bit, dislodge some of the sediment that's in between because of this embeddedness. And that is going to wash down into sections 4 and 5, where then we're going to suction vacuum them out. So the vacuuming is going to happen. Oh, before I go there, the question is going to be, what's going to happen with the sediment deposits? Well, obviously, there's a little path that you can't see here, but it comes around and goes over the bridge. And then we're going to carry by hand. And then just in this portion of the circular driveway, which is nice and flat, we're going to have a tarp, and we're going to deposit the sediments on that tarp. And the tarp, if I have my way, will have the handles. If you've seen some of those, it's a tarp that's almost like you can make it into a little box, a receptacle. And what's going to happen with these, once we're done with the suction vacuuming, these sediments will be put into this area, which I'll explain in a moment. So section dredging or section vacuuming, as it might be the case, will be employed by Mr. Vogt, Matthew Vogt of New England Aquatic Services. He's probably well known in the area. We've gone out to the site. We've looked at the site together, put our heads together. He has equipment that he can bring close to the pond, and we're talking about a pump that 2 people can carry out in order to accomplish the vacuuming. And the slurry of sediment is going to be discharged into a dewatering silt bag. And I'll show you the picture of where that's going to be. As we thought about that, and the question was, okay, so what's happening with the silt bag and the sediment once we're done? And we're going to have probably altogether between 3 and 5 cubic yards of material that we're going to be removing from the watercourse. Well, we discussed this, and it occurred to us that the best way to do it is to bring a moderate-sized dumpster. You've seen those metal dumpsters with the high sides that you can open in the back and go in, and place it in that particular location and put the actual silt bag in it, and then have, it has holes so that the water can then discharge. Now, let me show you where this area is. So this is this area. Again, it's quite flat, very little slope, but enough for us to, and so probably the edge of this dumpster will be right about here. And then behind me also. And then we have a little bit of a catch basin here. It's not your traditional catch basin, is not as deep, but that's where all the water goes to. And the idea here would be to most likely put a silt sack in that. We'll have to find one that's of a smaller size, so that so we have an extra level, an extra layer of protection from water that's coming, so that by the time it gets here, it's clean. But even if it isn't as clean as we like it to be, it's going to be further protected. And then this discharges into a stream. And I didn't show you the pipes. There's a couple of pipes that come out of that catch basin. They're probably a 6 to 8 inch diameter. They're not very big. And the noise you hear is my cat just dropped everything on the floor. Oh, well, sorry about that. So right in front, and I didn't show that, right in front of those 2 outlet pipes from the catch basin, we're going to have a check dam with hay bales, and again an additional level of protection. And if necessary, we'll have a little temporary check dam with hay bales somewhere in a narrow portion of the intermittent watercourse. This is an intermittent watercourse that comes in here from other portion of the property, and obviously has a wetland character to it. So we thought with all those levels of protection that we should not have any impact to the water that's flowing within the intermittent watercourse and eventually discharges to the pond. Now, one of the things, and going back to perhaps this photograph, is we're removing some of the sediment. We might inadvertently remove some of the vegetation right at the edges of this stream habitat. And this is vegetation that was actually planted during the enhancement and restoration of the stream back when. And so our plan, we're basically showing that we have a selected a seed mix, which is a pretty typical seed mix that has a wide variety of riparian type species and wetland type species. You can see here, Virginia wild rye would be one of them. Rice cutgrass would be another one. And then we're going to, in addition, going back again to figure 3, in addition, we're going to go, once we're all done, and plant a minimum of 200 plugs of emergent species. And, you know, those are the little plugs that come in little pots. And we have selected 4 species which are pretty typical for these kinds of applications. And those are sweet flag, trumpet weed, which is one of the Joe Pye weeds. We call it trumpet weed now. Blue flag iris, which there is some iris there, but it's not the blue. It's I think it's the yellow. And then cardinal flower, which is a very typical, beautiful species of riparian areas, especially where there's a little bit of light exposure. So one last thing that I'd like to say before opening it to any questions is that we did consider alternatives. And the alternatives consisted of doing nothing. Well, there'd be no restoration involved, or just dealing with the sediment deposits in section 1, which will be here, and in section 5, which is the last one just before the pond. But we thought that it would be best for us, if we're going to be expending the effort to do a proper job and have the best benefit for the aquatic community. So restoring the entire stream section here, all 156 feet. And Janet, have I forgotten something?
Nope, you've got everything.
Okay, I'm happy about that. Thank you.
Oh, well, thank you very much, Mr. Logan. Is this a good time to take some questions?
Yes, please.
Yes, of course.
Yep. So do we have some questions for Mr. Logan and Attorney Brooks?
I had one question. This is Commissioner Brunelli. It appears on segment A of the map, proposed stream channel restoration, mitigation, and enhancement areas, that it says existing stone channel wall to be removed. Is that being planned at this time, or was that work done previously? I see the map.
That's correct.
On it.
So we've used, because this was basically what's there now. I wouldn't call it an as-built, but it's pretty darn close. So this is what was proposed before. So we're doing no removal of any of the hard substrate. All we're doing is removing the sediment that has been deposited.
Okay, thank you for the clarification.
You're welcome.
And George Perkins, for the record, what type of aquatic life is there, and is there any danger of them being destroyed through vacuuming?
True. So most of the microinvertebrates that we found in not in great abundance was in sections 1, 2, and 3, but in particular in section 2 and 3. And those are the ones that you would typically find in associated with hard habitat, hardscape habitat. So yeah, there are some fish. We did see some minnows, and I think in table 1 you saw that we had some dace that we saw. Obviously, those will get out of harm's way by swimming. And there probably is going to be a little bit of a take for the aquatic organisms, but this is a small area. So what happens usually is they repopulate the area pretty quickly from the upstream portion. And that will happen probably within 1 season.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
This is Commissioner Jameson. So I'd just like to go back to the buildup of the sandy and silty sediment. You mentioned that this typically occurs naturally. So I'm interested in why you think there's been this significant buildup and whether there's anything planned that will prevent it or slow it down in what you're proposing.
Yeah, so this is what we call, what has happened here is an accelerated accretion of sediment because of activities within the watershed within the past few years. If the activities hadn't happened, then this accumulation would have probably taken another decade or 2. So this is accelerated. So it's really compromised the habitat so that the stream itself can't clean itself out, because when the big slug of sediment came, it was so significant that it went from channel bank to channel bank and filled all the lower areas like section 1 and then section 4 and 5.
Thank you. So what is likely to have caused this accelerated consolidation of sediment?
Development within the watershed.
Okay. And how long do you think that the work you're proposing is going to last before you get yet more buildup?
Well, hopefully, I think if I'm looking at the watershed correctly, it looks like there's not a tremendous amount of opportunity for additional development. Maybe some, but not any large amounts. And so once this is done, which by the way should take us about a week to do, it's not a tremendous amount of work. It should last for many decades.
Yeah, this is Dan Stepanek. Well, what's downstream from the piece that you're talking about?
It's a man-made pond, which is in part on our property. So let me show it to you again. So here is the property boundary is right here, as you can see.
Right.
And so part of the pond is within 1218, and some of the pond is on the next property over. These 2 properties were kind of connected. They were, I think, relatives. And so the pond, when it was created, it was done on a single property. And then further down, so let's see, what can I show you? Further down, it's just a wooded area with a stream that goes right through it, as you can see here. So there's the kidney-shaped pond that's entirely within the 2 properties, our property and the neighboring property immediately to the south. And of course, it has a little dam and a cascade down into the perennial watercourse.
And this is Janet Brooks for the record. In conjunction and during the planning phase of this project, the clients also utilized an engineering firm that looked at the pond to assess whether it would be wise to address any sediment buildup there. And actually the engineers suggested that the buildup apparently was happening earlier in the stream and not so much in the pond, and didn't recommend any remediation at this time in the pond.
Hi, Beth Sanford for the record. Just curious in terms of the 200 plugs that you're going to plant, are they all natives?
Absolutely, yeah. They're natives, and they're the kinds of species that you would expect in a similar riparian habitat.
For the record, Angela Jameson. Mr. Logan, what is the most difficult aspect of this project from your perspective? Where could there be the biggest problems or something not going according to plan?
So the thing that we need to be very careful about is when to start, because that's going to determine when we're going to end. And we need to be very cognizant of the forecast, because we don't want to have any significant storms, rain events that interrupt what we're doing, because we will have to do additional sedimentation erosion controls, and basically we'll stop everything, and we might have to begin again. So that's, in my mind, that's the most critical. I wouldn't call it difficult, but critical portion. As far as difficulty is concerned, I have full confidence in Matt, because Matt Vogt of New England Aquatic Services, because I've seen his work before, and he's extremely careful. He was careful to size the kind of equipment that needs to be brought to this job that's not too big. And from my own perspective, probably the most difficult thing to do is to do the handwork, because I think, and I'll be responsible for that, and me and my helpers, because it's busy work. It's getting into the nooks and crannies and getting that sediment out and putting it into the burlap bags, and then having two people carry it out. That's going to take some finesse on our part. And that's what I have in my back of my mind as being the most difficult portion. I think the suction vacuuming should not be an issue. And by the way, the silt boom or the turbidity curtain will remain in place for a period of time after the work is done, probably a month.
Thank you for that. And so when would you propose starting this project, given that the weather forecast is important?
Correct. So in talking with Matt from New England, we said, Matt, for your suction dredging, I mean, obviously for me, it would be wonderful if the stream was as dry as could be for me to go in there and make my job easier. But for the section vacuuming, that you need some water in order to suction. So if it's dry, you're having a little problem. You have sort of the right amount of water, not too much, not too little. So, and then looking at the forecast, we're probably looking ideally, if the forecast is the typical forecast, to be doing this something between the end of May and mid-June of this year, or we can flip over to early portion of the fall.
May I ask a question?
Sure.
Kathleen Holland for the record. Mr. Logan, depending on the and hopefully a favorable review this evening, with the plugs and the seeding that's going to be necessary to be done, what is the best time of year to accomplish that aspect of it?
True, that's a good question. So if we did a fall work, then obviously we'd have to wait for the next season. If we did it in the spring, I think the end of our window, unless we wanted to expend time for having some there with a watering hose, especially in the summer, we wouldn't want to do that, because the level of the water is going to go down. And by the way, I didn't mention this earlier, that the planting, this kind of planting happens above what we call the ordinary high water. So you're not planting it in where the stream wants to be most of the time. It's above that, and those little nooks and crannies maybe a little step above. And so a cutoff would be most likely the end of June or first week of July. We wouldn't want to go any further than that. Seeding, similar, spring seeding or fall seeding.
Okay. And what's the germination for the seeding approximately?
About 25 to 30% first year, and then an additional that much the second year. Now, if we think that we have an area that's a requirement of a little more care, and when I say care, if we have exposed an area, whether we took some sediment out and it's just raw, and it's above the ordinary high water, then we would probably want to employ a little bit of annual ryegrass if we were doing it in the spring, or if we were doing it later, maybe even winter rye, but probably annual ryegrass for quick germination.
I have one last question. In that there is one additional project that's going to be taking place north of where you're going to be doing implementing your work, should you get a successful review this evening. Do you have any considerations or concerns about perhaps waiting to do your work until the other work is resolved? And I know there's some challenges with that, but I just wanted to throw it out there as a conversation.
May I respond, George, and then you can add in. Ideally, this entire work, the joint application with Grace Farms and our individual project, were to be 1, 2 in the order we came to the commission. The joint application along the inner fence swale, and then in case that sends anything into the stream, we would do that remediation work. For reasons unrelated to the erosion control in that joint application, the Army Corps is having problems proceeding for interagency disputes unrelated to the swale issue, having to do with wildlife they are locating in the state of New York. And so we just don't know if we're going to lose an entire year, which we may, on our joint application. We're not sure that we would like to wait an entire year, because that also means the planting plan on the stream is delayed all that much further. So George, now if you have something else you'd like to say.
That's pretty much. I mean, ideally we want to do 1, 2, do the swale, and then right after that, do the stream.
Well, I understand that's it's a challenge with the waiting on the closing the loop with whatever they have going on with the Army Corps. Just be aware that permits issued in New Canaan are good for 5 years. So there's a 5-year period. So if you decided to wait, you do have that option to wait, depending the other matter being resolved and hopefully implemented. So just something to take into consideration when you're planning the strategy for the work that you'll be doing as well.
Thank you. Do we have other questions from the commission or from the Director of Wetlands? No. Anybody feel that there need to be special conditions attached here?
Well, I just have a few comments regarding the application. I've been working with both Janet and George have both been working with me on this application, and we started the discussions a few months ago and went through our wetland checklist very comprehensively, and they have pulled together a very comprehensive plan indicating all of the sediment that needs to be removed and broken down section by section. I think that probably came across hopefully clear to the commission members this evening. In addition, I think their plans a realistic approach in that they have right size the equipment to the area that there is a little more heavier work to be done in the way of the suction dredging. That dredger just finished a project that you all approved a few months ago over on Dabney Road, and that was successful as well. So he has a good work history here in New Canaan. And then unfortunately, the backbreaking work that will be required. There's no getting around that. And I think they've come up with a strategy to, handle it, to get it to the driveway, to then remove it off the site in a reasonable fashion. The planting plan is completely appropriate for the replanting. And as you see, this property is quite beautiful. And I have no doubt that the owners will want to re-beautify the area upon completion of the mechanical things that need to be done. I guess one special condition sometimes that we consider is upon completion of the installation of the landscaping activities, in this case, plantings and seeding, that a final review is done and a report submitted to the agent, to the commission, so that I then can go back out and do a final wrap up, make sure there's no erosion or things of that nature. So I think that's a pretty standard one that we typically would consider for a project such as this. Other than that, there's really no as-built requirement or anything in that regard. As far as other departments that would have commented on this, anyone that was asked to review it, there were no comments from engineering and no comments from health department, because they're outside of any review areas for those departments and don't trigger anything in that regard. I think we've crossed every T and dotted every I, as far as I can tell on this one. And they'll have to make a decision on when to proceed, based on what might be happening north of where they are, and be prepared that they may have, some additional minor things to correct. Should even just if a storm event comes through, which Mr. Logan actually talked about, they do have some provisions built into their plan that these things do happen sometimes. Mother Nature.
Thank you. So would anybody like to make a motion?
This is George Perkins for the record. I would like to compliment the applicants on an outstanding presentation. It was very easy to follow. I move that we accept the application as presented.
With or without the special condition that Kathleen?
If there is, with the special conditions that Kathleen outlined.
Okay.
And amend that with the special conditions.
Second.
Thank you, Commissioner Sillo. All those in favor, please raise your hand. Thank you. Any abstentions? Any votes against? No. So the application with the special condition that upon completion of planting seedings, there's a final review and report submitted to the Director of Inland Wetlands has been approved. So thank you very much for a very good presentation.
Thank you. Much appreciated.
Thank you very much.
Happy spring officially.
Yeah.
First day of spring.
Okay.
Perfect timing. Thank you both. I appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Thank you. Take care, everyone.
So now we move on to, this is Angela Jameson for the record. So now we move on to item 7, application number 22-23-24, 67 Carter Street, Estate of Hartwell C. Self. So as you can see from the agenda itself, what we have here is a request to change the inland wetlands and watercourses map of New Canaan. This particular item has been tabled until our meeting on April the 10th, so that we can hold a public hearing on this matter. We are required to hold a public hearing when changes are proposed to the inland wetlands and watercourses map. Kathleen, is there anything you'd like to add to that?
No, the majority of the commission, we did do our site visit. We carried through with the site visit the other day, so I'm pretty sure everyone has visited that site, maybe with the one that might need to go on their own at some point. So no, it would just be carried over. Unfortunately, the public hearing notice was overlooked in order to have the hearing. Have to just table it in time to do the public hearing notice, which fits into our April 10th meeting. The applicant is aware and was understanding of the volume of work. So we'll be good to go on April 10th. for a public hearing on that matter.
Very good. Anybody want to add anything to that or say anything? If not, we will then move on to item 8 on the agenda, which is 17 and 23 Hill Street 72 LLC. But before we do that, I believe that Commissioner Brunali had something she wanted to say.
Yes, as the commission already knows, I have a professional conflict in this matter, so I will be recusing myself from the remainder of the meeting.
Thank you,
Thank
Beth.
you. So please could I ask Commissioner Owsley to take Commissioner Brunali's place for this particular item?
Yes.
Thank you. So here we are, application.
And just do a few housekeeping things. This is Kathleen Holland for the record. I'm actually going to move to the rear console so that I can put up the resolution onto the screen and you'll be seeing it on the screen as well as those at home. In addition, I just would like to announce that Attorney Pete Gelderman is on the Zoom call and is available to answer any questions that the commission may have as we get into the deliberation for Hill Street.
Thank you
relocate
very much. So just in question of procedure this evening, we're going to be continuing the deliberations that we started on the 13th of March in respect of this application. And I should read out the application number. It's 22-23-11, 17 and 23 Hill Street 72 LLC. And the application requests approval of regulated activities associated with a 93-unit residential community development, including site development preparation, construction, and maintenance of building, accessory structure, and associated driveways, parking areas, and drainage measures in designated upland review area. The application also proposes to improve the substantially constructed and previously approved access driveway crossing area, including increasing the pervious surface of the access driveway from 16 to 20 feet and extending the existing retaining wall along the access driveway. So again, this is going to be a discussion amongst the commission members with contributions from Director Holland and from Town Attorney Gelderman as we go through this. And we have, as you know, a timetable here as far as when we have to actually vote on this application. So I'm going to propose that we see how far we can get this evening. In just a little while, I propose that we go through the draft resolution that Kathleen Holland has prepared for us. And when we do that, she's going to be busy taking notes and working on revising the draft resolution as we talk. And what we may end up doing is actually, once we finish that discussion, taking, say, a 10-20 minute pause in the meeting so that she can get caught up and make sure that she's captured everything, because before we can vote, she needs to be able to read to us in full the draft resolution. So we may be able to actually vote on this evening, but you know, we've got some discussion ahead of us, and if it proves impossible to finish that discussion this evening, we do have another meeting which was scheduled for 2 days' time, Wednesday, the 22nd of March. So that's the procedure that I propose that we take. So what I'd like to do first is go around the table and ask every commission member to confirm that they've reviewed the minutes and the draft resolution, as well as the record of all the things that have been submitted by the applicant, the interveners, and the peer reviewers. At the end of our last meeting, we took a straw poll. 5 members were leaning towards approval of the permit, with pretty stringent special conditions. One member preferred not to express a point of view until she had re-reviewed the evidence. And one member was leaning towards denying the permit. So I would like to ask each commission member to firstly confirm the things that I mentioned, and then secondly, invite them, if they would like to say anything further about how they are leaning or to further clarify their point of view. Who would like to start?
Yeah, this is Dan Stepanek. I'll start. I have not changed my mind since last Monday. I still feel that approval of the application is what we should do, with very strident special conditions. So that's where I am. I have not changed at all.
And could you confirm, please, that you have reviewed the minutes, draft resolution, as well as the record?
Yes, I have reviewed the minutes and the draft resolution for the record. Yeah.
Thank you very much. I think Commissioner Sanford looked like she wanted to say something.
Yeah, yes, Sanford for the record. And I am the one who abstained really with the intent of reviewing the testimony from our peer review experts. I was here on February 27th when both of our experts testified, but I thought given the context of the additional material and time that it would be helpful to review their video, that YouTube that we have on our website, which I did, and I do have some comments which I'd like to discuss now. So just in terms of our own perspective of evaluating the evidence, it's really important to rely on these experts because we are not the experts. And we did have two very strong independent experts in the form of Joe Canis, who is a professional engineer at Teagan, and just to look at his CV, which is on some of the materials that we have. He has expertise in various civil engineering disciplines, including floodplain management, modeling, storm water management and collection systems, roadway design, and construction administration, all very relevant to this project. And the other expert that testified and provided lots of materials to us was Michael Klein of Davidson Environmental, and he's a senior wetland scientist, and he's been doing that since 1983. Which is a long time. And his firm specializes in biological wetland surveys, impact assessments, and mitigation planning. So what I did, and I'm going to take a little bit of time because none of us have a written transcript from that testimony, and I went through and watched the 2 hours of their testimony and wrote as much as I can some of the closed caption copy of what they were saying. It's I wouldn't call this exactly verbatim, but I want to quote some of the things that were said in that testimony, which I found very helpful. And part of the reason it was helpful is reading a written document that is just words on a paper is very two-dimensional, black and white, which makes it literally black and white and conceptually black and white. And to hear an oral testimony for me, along with some of the question and answers, really put things in a context and gave it another dimension that helped with my understanding of what their expert opinions were. So I'd like to share some of the things that stood out from there. And I know one of the starting premises is that this is a very highly engineered development that requires a significant amount of construction and proper implementation and ongoing maintenance of this complex storm management controls during and after construction are critical to protect the water course and wetlands from avoidable indirect adverse impact. We all know that, and that's why we're here. So we go in with the underlying assumptions. Both of our experts says that the potential impact to the wetlands, this is what they said orally during their testimony. This is Joe Canis. There is a potential impact to the wetlands if the storm systems are not designed properly. If they're undersized and more water goes into the system, then the system can support. Michael Klein said, the ability of the system to operate as designed is critical to the protection of the wetlands. Implementing and maintaining sediment erosion controls is a significant element that is critical to protecting the wetlands against adverse impact to the wetlands. And I have time markers of all this if anybody wants to actually go to where this was said in this their testimonies. And Michael Klein said also that he agrees with the intervener that erosion sedimentation during construction poses the greatest adverse impact on the regulated resources. So in going through could you repeat that one? That he agreed, this is Michael Klein said he agrees with the intervener that erosion sedimentation during construction poses the greatest adverse impact on the regulated resources. He's not saying it's going to happen, but he says it's a threat. And so clearly, the ingoing kind of assumption is that this is a big issue and that we have to make sure it works properly. I think there's a couple of issues that really stood out to me about the whole process of how this has gone about. And throughout, there's been continued changes to the plan. There's been late submission of material. Some details been missing. Some was submitted too late for review. And there are some unresolved issues that were not completely clarified through the process. You know, we have seen changes, like we had a diversion swale, which is now a berm, which was recommended by Michael in his February 27th testimony. He didn't have time to review the wall evaluation because of its late submission. And he went on to say that, you know, he was awaiting throughout the process, this is Michael Klein, for answers, but he was disappointed to get the package so late. This is right before he got it on the February 20th, before the public trial on the 27th. And he said that, you know, these kind of issues usually take a lot of back and forth, and it's not usually resolved in one round, and that's what his experience of 40 years has proven. So he was a little bit of a complaint that, you know, but it also implies what the effect is on the commission is that we're put in a position of defining conditions of the approval to resolve these discrepancies that we're comfortable with, and that there's some conflicts that should have been looked at earlier. And I would hope that we had these responses sooner, so more of these things could be cleared up. Those are in the words of Michael Klein. You know, he also was noting that there were some confusions about various drawings or dates, the applicability. So I think the conclusion comes through the process. It has not been streamlined, and makes it a little more challenging for us to even create the detailed conditions if we were to go ahead to accept this. So that is one issue in terms of the process. The second, which I think we've decided is not a major one, but it's that we're not following the town's policy on the modest increase in the surface elevation of the wetlands, that it's not consistent with the town's drainage policy. And Maria, our town engineer, asked, you know, will the Wetlands Commission grant a waiver from that policy? And which is not usually the that it's not, I think it's the long and short of it is that we do not comply with the town's volume reduction requirement, but it's not indicated that it would have significant impact on the wetlands, but just to note that. I come to another issue that was discussed, and this is mostly, I think this is all by Michael Klein, our wetland scientist, is that the modeling of the wetlands functions and values, which was used to determine the impact on the wetlands. We had some discussion. He mentioned it in his written document. He mentioned it when he went through that document in his testimony on February 27th. And then Dan asked him some questions in a question and answer. And what he seemed to have kind of a prejudice against that approach, but I think the reason why is something that we should keep in mind is that the technique, as he describes it, tends to obscure small impacts because it's not a reproducible method, because one person says it is a modest value for a certain function. You can't reproduce that result. He said it a little more clearly here to Dan's question about it when Dan asked him if this method was outdated. And he went on to say that the concern I have is that by saying that a function is provided under a moderate level under the present circumstances, and it will be provided at a moderate level under the future conditions, does not mean that there is no impact. I think it is that the impact is that it obscures small and medium-sized impacts, and it relies to a very high degree on the judgment of the person who's doing the work. And he went on to say, if everything operates exactly as designed, there is not significant impact, but I have concerns about the reliance on this complex system. So it seems that the methodology to say that there's not going to be an impact has a subjective nature. This is me speaking. And as he said, it obscures small and medium-sized impacts. And I think we at the Inland Wetlands Commission are concerned about all kinds of impacts on the wetlands and watercourse. So the modeling is another issue that I just covered in terms of being something to consider that came up during that testimony and in the written work from our experts. The next thing to mention is what is the long-term performance of the storm management system and the snow removal system. Michael started out and mentioned the use of environmentally friendly de-icer. And his question was, how do you enforce that moving forward? This is a question that has several people, both on the consulting side and on the regulating side, scratching their heads. How do we guarantee that these complex systems are maintained in the future and properly monitored? It went on to say, the critical question here is has the long-term performance of those systems, either both during construction and after construction, been adequately addressed? We completely agree with the intervener that storm water discharged too quickly from the infiltration system would not be fully treated. So that is one of the reasons why, in addition to verifying the capacity of the driveway to infiltrate stormwater, it is also critical to verify the design assumptions for the infiltration system from the storm water management plan, not just from the driveway, but from those underground systems. It is important that their construction and design and work as anticipated. he went on to talk about bonding and what he thought was kind of a usual way to approach it. And he said it starts with bonding, the bonding required to ensure execution. It's not unusual to have an erosion sediment control bond and an implementation of wetlands mitigation with wetlands buffer planting and invasive species management. The third element is the long-term performance of the storm management system. The question is how to protect it into perpetuity. For number 2, he's talking about the wetlands mitigation. The plan needs to elucidate what the success criteria are, but once you achieve that, that's done. The last element is the one I expect there to be a lot of discussion about, the long-term performance of the stormwater system. And it's quite, Angela had a question to Michael, and he went to say, at this point in time, my concern is that there are additional elements that should be represented in the plan to give higher degree of confidence that over time that these measures will function. And to me, that gave me a sense that he doesn't have a high degree of confidence in the long-term performance of the system. And he went and talked a little bit, kind of conceptually about all systems require maintenance. And that's what, we're talking about here. Some systems are designed to be largely passive. Some systems require more in terms of maintenance, and some systems require more active intervention. I think the level of complexity rises, the likeliness of an unintended effort increases, which is why I have commented that you have a very robust systems of bonding and monitoring in place if this project is to be approved. It's a conundrum. It is a little more difficult to ensure the long-term viability of these systems compared to a simpler system with storm basins. Properties that are dense more likely require complex systems. So he at the end recommended, which is something that we're not discussing because we learned from our attorney, but he recommended that the prudent course was to do a 2-acre lot, not a 93 residential development. And that's not what we're here to discuss, but implicit in what I read from what he said during his testimony, that there is risk, that you can't always manage what might happen in a very complex system. And I know that Angela spoke very well last week about some of the risks that she saw, as a long-term commission member. And I would have to say that between the lines, what I hear is that although there wasn't an ardent, objection that this was going to fail, that there is a lot of risk with a complex project like this. And it gives me strong reservations to approve this application.
Thank you very much, Commissioner Sanford. So would it be fair to say that you're leaning in one direction or the other at this point in terms of
yes,
approving?
I would not. I would vote against the application.
Okay, thank you very much. Well, let's continue around the table. Who'd like to speak next?
Okay.
Commissioner Woike.
Right. Good evening, and that was very well done, Beth. Thank you.
And could I just ask you to confirm at the beginning that you have reviewed the minutes and the draft resolution as well as the record?
Yes, I confirm that I have.
Thank you.
I think one of my concerns, what is the runoff amounts of the drainage that were reported. And I believe in looking back at some of our notes that even the applicant's experts produced these numbers for runoff, and they seem very high. The property is wooded with trees, and they would absorb the rainfall unless the trees are removed to build this piece of property. So that would be a problem. The applicants, to counter the issue, the applicant used every possible method possible to minimize these problems, using the porous driveway materials, the replanting trees, bushes, and so forth, catch basins, and even covering half the roof with grass, which I'm not sure will 4 inches of grass on part of a third of the roof would have any influence or affect this at all. So I don't think these steps are going to solve the problem. Our own reviewer, or Davis, the reviewer, he admitted that he does not have the expertise to evaluate whether that credit works, and suggests that we consult with others on the issue. And should a major storm hit, I'm not sure that 4 inches of soil on part of the roof would make much of a difference. That was one of my questions or comments. Another comment further on in one of our, I guess this is from Mr. Hans, that he recommends this robust bonding measures, and they have given us some of that. But I think that when he says that, it seems to me that that is obvious that he's worried, they're worried about what is going to happen there. And last week when we met, Attorney Gelderman,
Yes,
said that if we came up with a feasible and prudent alternative, which that's mentioned, we aren't here to discuss, but that would be the two houses, the 2-lot subdivision up there. I guess. Okay. So I'm leaning towards not approving it.
thank you very much. Who would like to speak next? I think we have 4. to go.
I guess I'll speak. I have one thing ringing in my head constantly throughout this whole thing, which is our town engineer who we pay, or who the town pays to full-time go over this, did mention in a meeting, and you can look at all the facts, you could look at all the fluff, you could look at all the calculations. At the end of the day, Maria, and I hate to put Maria on the spot, Maria did say, I cannot tell the applicant how to engineer their stormwater management system. I am still on, I'll be completely honest, I'm on the fence. I am just concerned that a 25-year system, I don't know, I'm sure it works for a 25-year storm. I don't know if it works for a bigger storm. Obviously, even though we have had all the calculations and all the calculations from DeAndrea come up. I can't say that I'm totally convinced about that.
Excuse me, just one moment. Somebody's speaking in the background. Could you mute yourself, please, while Commissioner Sillo finishes his comments?
So I do have a reservation on it. I mean, it is for a 25-year storm, and I think Maria's comment is saying, maybe, implying or saying, hey, you could do a bigger system. I frankly think that the applicant doesn't have the room on the site for a system, a 50-year system. Again, I could be wrong on that. I do know that some of our experts at the end, even though Commissioner Sanford has said that, brought up these very in depth and spent some serious time going through the video. I think that our experts also said that there, at the end, there wouldn't be any adverse impacts to the wetlands. But then, to Beth's point, with this system, and if everything goes exactly to plan, right? So I am, again, severely on the fence. And again, if I do vote to approve, it is going to have some very, very stringent guidelines. But that's kind of my take on it. I mean, I try to keep it as cut and dry as possible. I mean, it just seems to me like there was trying to do a lot of proof of, yes, it will work. My thing is, if it rains and you get a 50-year or 100-year storm, or 2 inches an hour or 3 inches an hour, or whatever we've seen in the past couple summers, I don't know that this system can handle it. And yes, they say, okay, then the overflow pipe goes through. Great. What happens if the water just starts rushing over the whole system, or rushing off the roof, or rushing off down into the wetlands? So again, I'm on the fence, but as of, that's just my take on it right now.
Thank you, Commissioner Sillo. Commissioner Perkins, would you like to go next?
Well, I don't think I have much choice at this point.
Could you please? Well, actually, you do have a choice,
I would like to
that you reviewed the minutes and the draft resolution and the
yes, I have reviewed the minutes, the resolutions. I did not look at the past meetings, and I would like to compliment Beth on a very comprehensive and in-depth review of the system. Like Anthony, I'm concerned about the 25-year, because I have seen the effects of an out of control water. And right now I was leaning toward approval, but right now I think maybe I'm seriously considering voting against it at this point. I'm taking into consideration the way this has been gone about, with two houses, and then a 12-foot driveway, a 16-foot driveway, and then a 20-foot driveway, and the methods and the way that the applicants have not gotten to us in a reasonable amount of time so that we can do a proper review. But that's basically where I am right now.
So this is Angela Jameson for the record. Just to sum up, you're seriously considering voting against?
Yes.
Okay, because I'm taking up, another straw poll here. So
it's still a straw poll, so that's good.
Yeah, so I have 3 categories. Yes, approval, denial, on the fence. I think we got 1 on the fence so far, and everybody else has been. Should I put you in the denial category for now?
Yes.
Thank you very much. So I'd just like to return to to Commissioner Sillo and ask him to confirm that he reviewed the minutes and the draft resolution and the record.
I did review the minutes, the draft resolution for the record. I would also like to just to quickly point out, I don't know if, and to be fair to the applicant, I don't know if this commission should weigh into our decision that applicants change and I've done it too on certain permits, not on a wetlands permit, but this wouldn't be the first applicant to change their mind or to change what they were doing. They did have an application, they altered the application. When I'm in town hall, you can ask Kathleen, I'm in town hall 3 or 4 days a week. We do change applications under the current, under our current applications, as long as it, is within the rules. I don't think that it would, there's many things that are and are not fair, but I think that changing or amending an application, people do that all the time. right? So I don't know if that's something that should weigh into the commissioner's vote. That's just my 2 cents on that matter.
Thank you, Commissioner Silo. Commissioner Owsley.
I did review all of the information. I join Anthony in being undecided. I take your point about everybody changes their mind. That's not a violation in my book. My biggest concerns remain the storm management systems, and as both Beth and Priscilla pointed out, I feel like the peer reviewer certainly said that if it functioned as designed, that would be acceptable. However, to me, the amount of bonding and the stringent request for bonding suggests that there isn't a high confidence in that it will function 100% as designed, and therefore that's a big consideration. In one of the earlier videos on March 11th, we discussed the sort of undue burden on the town in order to keep up with the compliance, which I think is a really big issue. There were so many issues that needed to be monitored, and I think even more than we laid out in this draft. We had briefly mentioned the use of herbicides or pesticides on the green roof, and those were never sort of fully vetted out. So I think the number of stipulations that would have to be put on this haven't even been completely thoroughly vetted, and I think they'd be incredibly burdensome to the town. And I would agree with Beth that the speed by which this information came in and then morphed and changed and so on made it really hard for anyone to assess it or give it the amount of time that it needed to have in order to, particularly our peer reviewers needed to have to really thoroughly sit with it. So I'm in the undecided camp.
Thank you very much, Commissioner Owsley. So I think the last commission member who hasn't commented, but correct me if I'm wrong, is myself, Angela Jameson. And I would like firstly to affirm that I have reviewed the minutes, the draft resolution, and the record. So I continue to believe that the commission should deny the application. This is a highly complex engineering project that involves major excavation. It has many phases and layers, and at the end of the day, there will be a 93-unit multifamily development that, as Commissioner Sanford described it in our March 13th meeting, will be shoehorned into a very small area, that part of which is in the upland review area and close to the significant wetlands that there are on this piece of property. So in my view, everything has to go absolutely perfectly for there not to be adverse impacts on the wetlands. And as we know, and as I stated at our last meeting, any complex engineering project ends up being messy with certain parts not going according to plan and unforeseen problems arising. There really is a very big difference between concept and reality. And there is significantly more construction in the upland review areas and in closer proximity to the wetlands than most applications that we approve. So we're in the usual situation of conflicting viewpoints from 3 sets of very well credentialed experts, and their conclusions differ on whether the proposed regulated activity will have an adverse impact on the wetlands. The applicants' experts, all of whom are highly credentialed and were, I thought, very polished, they say no. The interveners' experts are, and if they'll forgive me for saying so, somewhat less polished. But that's not a reason to disregard their conclusions. And the third-party experts had many questions and concerns about what is proposed, as Commissioner Sanford went through in great detail. And in my mind, their final conclusions, which were punctuated with statements starting with if and or provided, stop well short of giving this application a clean bill of health. And we, the commission, are really just like a jury at a trial. We're not expected to be the experts. It's our responsibility to decide which expert witnesses we believe. And I believe that the interveners experts are correct in saying that there will be an adverse impact on the wetlands for all the reasons that I set out in my very lengthy comments on the 13th of March, which deal with the stormwater management system, the integrity of the retaining wall, and the snow management proposal. I'm not going to go into those in detail, but I rely heavily on the conclusions of the interveners experts, as well as the concerns and big question marks that we heard from the third-party reviewers. So in my view, the applicant has not reached the very high burden of proof that demonstrates that there will be no adverse impact to the wetlands. So I continue to be leaning towards voting against approving this application. So with that, where our second straw poll has got us is we've got one in the yes camp, but with stringent conditions. We have 2 on the fence, and we have 4 that are leaning towards denying it, which is not the same thing, far from it, as voting to deny. I would like to suggest that we go through the draft resolution that Kathleen Holland prepared and take a look at those stringent conditions to see whether we think that they are in any way sufficient to mitigate adverse impacts on the wetlands, whether there is more that could be done to tighten them up. Is everybody okay with this way of proceeding? Very good. So let's take a look here. So the first condition, I don't know. I mean, maybe I should ask Dan Stepanek, who said that he wanted to see very stringent conditions, whether there was a particular condition that he wanted to circle in on to begin with.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, I've kind of lost. I've got the resolution in front of me, and this is Dan Stepanek, but I don't have any photos except the resolution. So I would like to go to. Let me pull this up. The special conditions, okay, and that would be.
Now here for, I think.
Pardon me? Now, therefore, be it resolved, after taking into consideration the entire record, the application number 2223 is approved with the following special conditions. Number 1 is okay. Number 2 is where I think needs to be embellished. The applicant shall hire a qualified site monitor or 2 monitors as needed to oversee the construction, phasing, erosion control plans, and stormwater installation construction activities. The site monitor or 2 does not replace the engineer. Okay, that's fine, but is in addition credentials of the selected site monitor shall be provided to the Director of Inland Wetlands. I think that these site inspectors should be selected by the town engineer and Kathleen Holland as director, as we did the 2 peer group people when we put together, when they were analyzing the the application. I think we have to have a bigger hand in selecting those site monitors. Let me read this.
Be really interesting, Dan, if we could use SE Minor as the site monitor. If the town employs them.
But I think that when we pick or select the monitor to, that person has to have some background in biology or wetlands, or something specific on the wetlands, and being able to detect how the wetlands could be adversely impacted by what's going on at the site. So I think we need to fine tune that. And if we're in favor of that, I will write out copy for that, but I don't have the copy in front of me.
So maybe we could just kind of discuss number 2, which you've spoken about. And
let me just finish, Angela.
I'm sorry.
I think we need to put in there a paragraph on enforcement. What that means. And we should have some guidelines on if there is an issue with the wetlands, what the fines may be, or what the bonding may be, and if there's repeat issues with the wetlands, to increase those each time. It's like a sliding fine fee, okay? And if the same wetlands, what do I want to say? Adverse effects happen time and time again, then they're going to have to pay a huge fine, or the bonding will be more than 125%. It will go up and up and up. Kind of a sliding fine fee. Let's see.
So Dan, rather than go through all the conditions, could we perhaps, discuss one and then move on to something else? But just in relation to that point, I do not believe that there is a sliding scale for fines or bonding. But I'd like to start with what you said about the site monitoring reports, because I too was concerned here that it didn't seem to me that it was sufficiently frequent or sufficiently specific about when the site monitoring would be increased to every other day. And I think that we need to have different kinds of site monitors if we approve with conditions. I mean, yes, absolutely, somebody with a background in soil science, but don't we also need there to be an engineer? I mean, this is a really complex engineering project, and that isn't the bailiwick of a soil scientist.
Yeah. Well, I think that's what we were talking about last week, was we would have multiple, right? We would have multiple people. And I think we talked about it last week as well. Like, if there was a special condition to have these, if we did approve this project, I thought we kind of came to the conclusion that we were going to have like basically 2 full-time people. Like, I mean, that's what I understood it as, Angela, is that there was going to be a full-time person while the installation of the system was going in at all phases. And then after those are in, to make sure that they're working properly throughout the construction of the project. So if it's a 2-year project, I was under the impression that we were going to have someone be there 5 days a week.
I agree. That was one of the notes that I made, is that it's sorry, Katie Owsley for the record. It reads to oversee all construction, phasing, erosion control plans, and stormwater installation. But I would have thought that the site monitors would have been on site for the duration of the project, soup to nuts, because there's a tremendous amount of damage that could happen during the construction of the building or anything else. So I don't know why we would limit it to that. I also am very concerned about how fines would work. I imagine in a project of this size that you could really absorb fines that would otherwise seem tremendously burdensome to an individual homeowner. Can be, $25,000 fine is enormous to an individual homeowner, maybe not as enormous to somebody who's developing a 93 unit. So I don't know what sort of stop actions can be involved, but I worry that we would set up a situation in which any fines could be absorbed into the total cost of the project and not really be a deterrent.
This is George Perkins for the record. One of the things that I totally agree with Dan is that the selection of the individuals, the monitors, should be done by our engineers and Kathleen, as opposed to the developers hiring their own monitors. I think it gives them more independence, even though they might be paying. They should be reporting into Kathleen and into our town engineers and the appropriate town personnel that are involved with the construction. I also feel that it should be the duration of the construction, and is needed. From time to time, there might be an expert required, for example, in storm management, to be brought in on just on a consulting basis. But I mean, I think this is absolutely imperative for this program, because it's immense, and it just needs to be constantly surveyed. As far as the fines are concerned, I'm not really sure how that works. There might be a formula, but I think the action is more important than the fines, just to be sure that hopefully there won't be any if they do everything correctly.
For the record, this is Angela Jameson. So the draft resolution calls for weekly reports, which to my mind suggests that the site monitor or site monitors would turn up once a week, write a report, and then submit it to the wetlands agent and the town engineers. But there's nothing in here that by the way, I'm not sure that just turning up once a week during the construction phase is sufficient. I agree with those who have said that there should be expert site monitors on hand each and every day that work is being carried out.
But Angela, I think the site monitors should be knowledgeable enough to know if it's not working right, and in all these areas. Okay, they have to have a background in construction and engineering. They're going to be people that's going to be tough to find. There's no question if they have all these, they have all this knowledge in these various backgrounds. But I think it's important for them, as soon as they see something that's adversely affecting the wetlands, that they don't wait a week. They call Kathleen, or they call the town engineer or somebody and say, "Hey, we got a problem."
I think Kathleen Holland would like to speak.
We're putting a lot of work on Kathleen.
I know.
George and Dan, can you hear me if I'm sitting and talking from the back of the room? Or
I can't hear Kathleen.
Kathleen, we can't hear you.
Yes, just give her a minute. She has to move.
She's got to jog over.
Oh, okay.
And she's moving fast. She'll be with us momentarily. That's the thought.
I'd like you over there.
I know, it sounds serious.
I just wanted to jump in quickly. Thank you, Chairman Angela, for giving me a moment here. A couple of things that you're discussing. First and foremost, this is a draft. So the special conditions that have been put together at this point in time are a launching point for all the things that you all now want to potentially add, amend, button up, elaborate on. It's completely a working draft. So that's first and foremost. And as far as fines are set by an ordinance within the town, which is set by a statute. So the fines ordinance and statute, it's $1,000 for an activity in a wetlands. That is a state statute, which the town of New Canaan has adopted as an ordinance, and which I have implemented and utilized at, over the years, probably in total 10,000, different projects over the years. 500 for a violation within the upland review area. That's it. That's what the state reps have adopted. That there's nothing beyond that unless you go through a big old court action. But I think that's a whole different thing. And maybe if Pete's on the call, he can add some color to this as well. So, fining, it's already built into our regulations for, if there is a violation at a project that goes to the level of a fine, the fine is issued and the applicant will need to pay it. It is for that one-time thing. If they go off to another section of the site and now they have a fine in another section of the site, that's a separate offense. So there is that ability. As far as enforcement also, I'm sorry, somebody's coming into the meeting, so I just have to admit this person. Sorry. As far as enforcement, which I think Dan may have been speaking about enforcement and whatnot, again, that is, I think Katie had also raised that issue, what if something does go wrong? Do we have the ability to do enforcement? Yes, as I've done it here already for this location. You guys had heard that last year. So if there's an action or something that occurs that raises the level of enforcement, I put on my enforcement hat and we switch into enforcement gear for this location. Those are the main things.
Yes, this is Angela Jameson for the record. So the conclusion I draw from this very helpful information or reminder from Kathleen Holland about the level of fines is, well, forget about that. They're meaningless in this kind of situation. It's a tiny little additional cost to the tremendous overall cost of this huge project.
So one thing I just want to add to that, for my purposes, when I'm doing enforcement on any one particular project, the fine is the fine. Yes, it's not a big deal. However, it's a shutdown, cease and desist of all activity. It's not like I just issue a fine and I walk away. There are additional time considerations, painful delays that the applicant and the owner of the property will have to suffer. So it's not just that a fine could be issued, it's everything that goes along with it as well. In addition, coming back before the commission to rectify, turn in a mitigation application. So it's not. Which also gets into the bonding. It's beneficial. Right? Bonding separate. Bonding. I'm saying
bonding separate.
No, but if there is a mistake made, the bonding's there to fix the mistake. Correct?
Only if the applicant doesn't fix it. So yes.
Yeah, but this is Angela Jameson. The damage may have been done, and then's the question of whether to the wetlands. This damage may have been done to the wetlands, and then there's the question of to what extent that can really be remediated. But I do take Kathleen Holland's point that it is a major additional cost to the developer if there is a cease and desist order and work has to stop. It could be potentially,
but the fines unto themselves are not a deterrent. Yes.
Would you like to just mention your name? No, sorry, Commissioner Owsley.
Sorry, that was Katie Owsley.
Katie Owsley, and yep. Okay, thank you.
Beth Sanford here for the record. In terms of the monitoring, we're looking at it being only through the construction phase. Is that right, Kathleen, in terms of the document? I know. One of the things, and it kind of harkens back to what I covered a little bit earlier, is the long-term oversight. How do we know the right de-icing elements are going to be used whenever there's a snowstorm, where the snow is being, dumped, where, what's happening in terms of all the management there? How do we know the whole maintenance that's required of the storm management system 15 years from now. I mean, not just 2 years within the construction period.
Management issue that you all have spoken about, and that included, they have actually given you a proposal for the instructions, number 4, sorry, there's a drain.
Again, we can't hear the response.
Number 4 and 5 speak to what that's talking about.
Kathleen, who you can't hear very well, is citing 4 and 5 as addressing the maintenance, but we don't have somebody that we're overseeing as a report to come in and tell us that things are being done on the proper maintenance schedule for the storm management system. It's up to the applicant to report back to us on a regular basis, is how we would word it.
In that covenant that they had provided, it's pretty standard.
Oh, yes. The covenant that Greenwich used. Yeah. Or Stanford. Yeah. Yeah.
Again, we cannot hear the response.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. I think we're going to have to ask Kathleen to come back to a mic that works. Yeah. Sorry about this, Kathleen.
Yeah.
Tonight. I'll just do them on paper.
Sorry about this.
That's okay.
So Kathleen was saying.
I was just saying that the item 4 and 5, special conditions 4 and 5 speak a little bit about the drafting of the covenant agreement regarding the stormwater management system. So there was a lot of details in that covenant. They were giving you an idea of something that could be used, that is used in other communities. And we would only basically be saying that, yes, there shall be a stormwater covenant drafted, and that would be reviewed by the town attorney and the town engineer and recorded on the town, land records. That's in perpetuity. So that goes beyond the life of your wetlands permit. Your wetlands permit only is good for 5 years. So that is above and beyond. It's a way to go beyond the life of the permit to assure that the system functions properly, that reports are submitted to the town on a timely basis.
Well, what does that mean, a timely basis? I mean, I think we have to fine tune this a little bit with the monitors. This is Dan. I think more work needs to be done with the monitors, and that isn't going to solve everything. I hear what you're saying. This is a tough application to look at all ends of it and all things that could happen. But I went. I didn't go as deep as Beth did on this, but it seems to me that the 2 third-party experts are saying it could work if it's done right, if it's done according to plan, and according to our town attorney. That's why I approved it, but with very stringent conditions. And if the applicant doesn't like these conditions, then I won't approve it.
Well, thank you for that, Dan Stepanek. This is Angela Jameson for the record. So maybe we need to be really, really specific about what we want under each of these items. And let me just throw out there, under number 2, I would like to see a qualified engineer and a qualified soil scientist out there every day that the site is being worked on, so that they can notify the town if there is a problem that is adversely affecting the wetlands, or if the construction is not going according to plan. I do not think it's enough just for it to be a weekly report, which, as I said earlier, suggests the person's there once a week.
I agree.
Okay.
That was Anthony.
So
For the record.
Yeah.
For the
So-
record, I agree. This is George.
Yep.
And I agree, this is Dan.
I agree that you're down.
While construction activities are.
If there's workers on the site before the CO is issued, there will be a
What if-
wetland soil scientist and a engineer on site.
What if they're painting inside the building?
Until CO is done. Until CO is complete. That's the only way to do it, because it helps you monitor.
But that's not a wetland activity.
Doesn't matter. It's helping us monitor the whole thing. We're still within the permit. Right?
Okay, so daily while.
Till CO is complete.
CO stands for.
Certificate of occupancy.
This is George Perkins for the record.
100-year storm, and painters are painting inside, and they can say, "Oh, look, there's a problem. Call Kathleen. Hey, Kathleen, there's a problem." Right? I mean,
I'm not following you now.
Okay.
Well, they don't have to wait a week, Kathleen, to report to you, or even a day. If they see it at 11 o'clock, they should be calling you or the town engineer at 11:30 and saying, "There's a problem here, and here's what it is." And
on the completion of site work, which I still don't think on completely, because then the parking lot has to get paved, and then everything changes again. Like,
Well, I was just using that as an extreme example.
Yeah. So okay. So
Okay.
on completion of, this is why you have to like almost give like a cut and dry line. Like now it's like, oh, completion of driveway. Then they can pave the driveway. Say, hey, it's done. You know.
Right. I know it's a difficult thing to wrap.
Could I jump in here for a minute? I'd like to ask Pete a question. Is there a possibility with these resolutions that on appeal, the applicant might say that they're unreasonable and burdensome? That's okay. I think you understand what I'm saying.
I do, George. Yeah, well, it's possible. If the decision is appealable by anybody who has standing to appeal it, and that includes the applicant, of course. And if he thinks I've seen that happen where conditional approvals have actually been appealed by an applicant where they thought the conditions were unreasonable. I suspect, and this is only my opinion, that the applicant would not appeal from the imposition of the conditions you're talking about so far. So, but I don't know that for a fact. That's just my own observation.
But this is
so we have to write. So we have to write them very specifically. So okay, thank you, Pete.
Yeah, you do. And remember, conditions only apply to an approval. So those conditions have significance if the commission decides to approve the application, subject to those conditions. There are no conditions of a denial. It's just denied. So
I guess then there will be a soil scientist and third-party engineer on site until all drainage is complete on the project.
Drainage, landscaping. That's what I think I kind of tried to break it down based on your conversations last month at phasing and erosion control plans. So it's construction phasing. That's your say.
I think that's
FP1 through 8A. That is all of that. So that's what I was referring to.
I would agree, Kathleen. I think that's fine.
And then the stormwater installation, construction activities, that is all of DeAndrea's implementation of every stormwater feature, everything. The outlet, the outfalls, the underground detention system, basins, anything related to diverting the water around. Somebody's there watching.
Makes sense.
So
yes.
that's what I was
So what about as an addition? So we have two experts there daily until all those aspects are completed. Then maybe if there's still work going on the site, we have, weekly reports until there's a CO.
That might be something that I think that we can probably, I'm not speaking. I don't want to put more work on Kathleen, but maybe like every 2 weeks, like if they're painting inside, yeah, Kathleen's right.
But to your point, Anthony, soil erosion controls have to stay in place
Agreed.
until we say they can come down. So
Agreed.
so the weekly inspection of soil and erosion controls is absolute. That's pretty standard operating procedure on any project.
Okay.
That doesn't give the existing site monitor for the applicant a free pass to go on vacation. They're still there doing all of their duties as they're required to do under their credentials and licensing.
Mhm.
The additional person is checking that person basically to make sure
I
that.
would agree.
So that's, and I just threw weekly out.
So you
there
want to do
really
weekly after everything's installed?
after installed? Yeah.
Okay,
If
I think that's
if that's what
Completed.
I think that's good.
I'm sorry, somebody wanted to say something?
I think you just said till it was completed.
Okay, are we sort of done for now with item 2? Move on to item 3. The applicant shall provide performance bond estimates to the town engineer for review and acceptance with bonding standards for the following activities: construction phasing, erosion control plans, stormwater infrastructure installation and mitigation plantings. Said performance bond shall be in an amount not less than 125% of the estimated cost of the work as determined by the town engineer. I mean, the third-party reviewers actually suggested that that the bonding requirements should be part of the application. But I think that the practice of the town of New Canaan has been for the town engineer actually to determine what the dollar value should be. But I would like to suggest that 125% is too low.
So let me just back up on that. The applicant's experts in engineering and soil scientists and landscaping, they provide the bond estimate for the work, which they did in the application. You have that information already. The town engineer will review to see that if they agree in that bonding, and then the standards with the bonds get set after that. So
but why 125%? There was discussion that was had about whether it should be 125%, 150%, 200%.
I think Michael Klein, if I'm not mistaken, recommended 125 in his report.
I thought he said at least.
He said
at least
minimum.
125% is fairly standard in and among the towns that we represent. That doesn't mean it has to be 125%. I don't think there's necessarily a limit there, but that is a fairly standard bond amount for that I've seen. So that's one of the reasons that's there. I think, Kathleen, I even put that number there, not you, but and that's simply because that's a fairly standard number among the towns in Fairfield County that we represent.
Well, Attorney Gelderman, thank you for that clarification. But I'm just asking why it is that in this case, where we're talking about a highly complex engineering project with many phases, we think that we should necessarily stay with the standard of 125%. If things go wrong, it could be very serious consequences here to the wetlands.
It's your decision if you would like to increase it. I did speak with the engineering department and they standardly collect 100%. So that kind of surprised me. Just FYI, that's been their practice.
Right. The other thing we have to consider here too is inflation is hot right now and it doesn't look like it's going to come down anytime soon. So whatever dollar value is agreed on, you do want to have some cushion for the fact that costs are quite likely to rise.
Should we call it 150%?
Decision. That's totally.
Commissioner Sillo has thrown out there 150%. Does anybody think that that's not a good idea? Okay. Sounds like there's a consensus there.
This is Dan, again, Dan Stepanek. Yeah, I think we need some guidance on that. Just to throw out a number, I don't like to do it that way. There's got to be some rationale in why we're.
So we're trying to find the engineering department will have a number for us.
Do you have a number in the packet? It was provided as part of the application.
Yep.
Of the breakdown.
Yeah,
That's one portion of it. You can use that as an example if you'd like, Priscilla, whatever that number was. So then what was that for, Priscilla?
What do you mean, what was it for? It was, you want me to list the things?
No, just the general
Oh, the
subject.
total was 75,735.
For the activities described. What was that one for?
Was site monitoring, erosion control measures and site monitoring.
So for example, if you were to use that one,
Mhm.
it'd be, they're estimating 75. Our town engineer would double check those numbers and all the special categories that they have in there, and then request a bond in an amount of 150% of that.
150%.
Yeah, that's what Anthony is suggesting.
Yeah.
Which I think.
And the bond, you guys have to remember, the bond is just a bond. They're not going to make, they don't, a bond for, if we pull something out in the town, right, we have a $5,000 bond, it costs $125.
Right.
So this thing's going to cost 10 grand. It's not like it's like,
It's not real money.
it's not, it's the bonding company that's on the hook, right? So
Right. Mm-hmm.
it's not like we're going to say, oh yeah, it's going to cost you now 140,000 instead of 70. Right. So, I mean, I don't think it's a huge deal. And it just protects us, like Angela said, it protects us from if there's something wrong with the system, or if something happens to the wetlands. So it's not just the system that we have to fix.
Okay. Are we ready to move on to number 4?
Angela, let me just go back to number 2, if you don't mind. This is
Sure.
Dan Stepanek. The key thing, and it seems to me, in what Kathleen said, when you find somebody, the $1,000 is not going to make a dent in their pocketbook, but the ceased and desist stopping work will. And I think that's what we have to work into. Some of the things, if they disturb anything, if they don't, if there's a peril, there's something wrong, and we have the right to actually stop that work on that until it's fixed. That's the important thing, and that's where it's going to hurt them in the pocketbook. And Anthony, you may know more about that than I do, but I think if you stop work on something, you have all these people there, and they're going to want to fix that thing very quickly.
I agree, and I think that's why Dan and I agree, and me and you have been very strong on this. I think that's why there's 2 people there. But in case something does go awry, to Angela's point, if it does go awry, we're double protected.
Okay. Well,
right. I mean, I think you're right. I think someone's going to catch it right away. But if not, we're protected.
Yeah. So this is Angela Jameson. I mean, for the record. So section 13, spot 10 of our inland wetland regulations deals with bond and insurance. If people want to take a look on that. So that is there. And also the enforcement mechanisms are, in the regulations. And as Kathleen says, she regularly undertakes enforcement actions as necessary.
Correct. I think it's already established after the fine that Kathleen can enforce a cease and desist, and there's other mechanisms at her disposal. So I don't know if we really need to specify that, since it's already there.
Okay. All right.
So can we move on to number 4? The stormwater management and operations plan shall include explicit instructions for a contractor in order to provide future maintenance access to the level spreader and riprap apron located at the bottom of the 8-foot retaining wall. No heavy machinery shall enter this area. I mean, this was something we were very concerned about, that actually to do proper maintenance of that retaining wall, you have to get over the wall itself, and we didn't want to see any access to the bottom of that retaining wall on the outside actually being through the wetlands. Does this kind of give enough?
Angela, this is Katie Owsley for the record. I was just wondering, and Anthony, maybe you can answer this, but just the term heavy machinery, I don't know if that's an industry standard, but to a layman such as myself, it's highly interpretive. So can we more?
You could go on to say all remove. This is specifically in the discussion around maintaining the scour pad and rock. So you could say something like no heavy machinery
over a certain weight or something,
and all removal of debris and
but I mean defining heavy machinery as is there a weight limit or so on? Well, I'm just saying it's a very subjective term.
You could say and shall only be done by hand or with hand tools. That
yeah, I think that's what
we should. I don't think
we should put any machine weight limits or any of that on there.
I just mean I would make it not to be subject to any sort of interpretation.
And listen, there are ways to maintain that wall with coming from the road and hanging down. Like there are ways to do it. I mean, there may be it's just as long as machines don't go on the bottom of the wall.
No, I understand the dilemma. Again, I'm still unsure about leaving any.
I would agree.
Interpreting the
I would say,
but
hand
but be done by hand or with hand tools would probably cover that.
Yeah, I would agree.
And just so you know, that number 4, the stormwater management operations plan, that is something they had proposed, which we still will staff once they draft it. We would agree or disagree on those things. So that would be included. There's into this area. And
okay, so are we ready to move on to number 5?
Yes.
Number 5, the applicant shall provide a drainage maintenance agreement covenant detailing ownership and responsibilities for the maintenance of infrastructures to be reviewed by the town attorney and town engineer and recorded on the town land records once agreed upon. How does this help? It's a covenant. All it says is I promise to do X, right?
The covenant is in your documentation. So it is well, maybe Pete could. It's a legal instrument, so maybe that's
well. I'm thinking about the practicality. Not
the practicality is it's an enforcement tool after the work is done. So there's monitoring during the work. And there's a maintenance agreement covenant after the work, and the maintenance agreement covenant will have specific obligations and responsibilities that the applicant or whoever owns the property subsequent to the applicant, because it runs with the land, it'll set forth what their obligations and responsibilities are. And if those are not met, it's a violation of the covenant, which in turn is a violation of the approval. And there are enforcement mechanisms, just like there would be during construction during monitoring if there were problems with construction. So this goes beyond the construction and puts certain limitations, restrictions, obligations on the landowner in perpetuity, and failing to comply is a violation.
Okay, so how would we know that whether there'd been compliance or not?
Only the same way we know with every approval, and that's through either an inspection or a complaint.
Well, should we perhaps think about adding some degree of inspection?
Or the lack of reporting. So this,
but
as well.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, Kathleen. Yeah, but the inspection is we don't want to put requirements for Kathleen or whoever is ultimately in her place, because remember, this lasts in perpetuity. We don't want to put limitations or restrictions or you know.
Well, I wasn't suggesting that it should be town employees that should inspect, but a third party.
Yeah,
it's a maintenance obligation. So in the agreement, we would probably have the requirement to provide, you know, it's maintenance. So what's a reasonable maintenance period? Annually, that there be an annual report submitted to the commission with respect to the maintenance.
They did provide a template for that, and it is in the record. So there is a starting point for that discussion, and it is in the packet. And you're just saying that, yes, you want this. That's what that special condition is about. And it does get fully developed, you know, if you go forward with an approval. That's one of the special conditions, that they have to, you know, now spell out the details of that drainage covenant and to the satisfaction of the town attorney and town engineer, and record on the land records.
Okay, so that wouldn't be something that we would opine on now and put in special conditions. That would be, we just say this framework needs to be in place, and then the applicant has to negotiate with the town on what's in it and what isn't in it.
Correct. And you could add a condition or add a sentence to paragraph 5 that requires me or the town attorney at the time to have the agreement approved by the commission.
You could have them come back for that.
Come back to you. You can leave it up to the town engineer and me to do that review, or you could say, look, we want to see it before it's recorded, before anybody signs it. We want to see it.
So that would be that the reporting would come back to the commission?
No, the agreement would come back to the commission.
Okay.
Before it's recorded.
Yep.
So you'd have another chance.
Yeah.
Yeah, and make sure that, I mean, I'm sure that the town engineer and the town attorney would do an adequate job of that, but it's still your commission that is in charge of this. So if you elected to make this a condition, you could add that as an additional sentence in that condition, that any drainage maintenance agreement covenant shall be approved by the commission prior to recording. And that's all it would have to say.
What do commission members feel about that?
I think it's good.
Okay. Anybody think that we shouldn't include that?
No, this is George Perkins for the record. No, I think it's a very reasonable a request that we approve the covenant, so that we know that, so that the monitoring process can be applied.
Okay. Anything else on number 5 before we move on to number 6? Number 6, the applicant shall provide a remote monitoring system for the interstitial space, I'm sure I mispronounced that, between the tank walls of the diesel fuel tank in order to detect for any leaks. And I believe that was a recommendation of one of the third-party reviewers.
And one or two of the commissioners brought that up as something they'd like to add.
Right.
And that's pretty straightforward, right, Angela?
I would think so.
Yep, it's
adequate. So should we put like a system approved by one of our one of our people that are on site?
It's not a bad idea, is it?
Just to make sure that we're getting it in there and it's the right system.
You could say a remote adequate monitoring system, approved monitoring. How about approved monitoring? Because I'm sure it's a standard.
Yeah, I'm sure it is too, but approved monitoring system.
Who's it approved by?
It's a third party.
The industry. I mean, I don't think there's anything beyond, you know.
This is George Perkins for the record. Is there a standard for certification on these? In other words, are there different levels of monitoring? So we could say approved and certified, but I think it should be approved. I don't know if there's an industry standard.
Yeah, I mean, Commissioner Sillo is suggesting that the system should be approved by the on-site monitors.
That's what they're there for.
Well, the monitors are there to monitor compliance. Maybe, I don't know if this is something within the expertise of the town engineer. And if it is, then perhaps the town engineer should approve the monitoring system. And then the on-site monitors have to monitor its success. So somebody, to approve the system, you could, either the town engineer or an appropriate, whoever that might be, an appropriate body. I mean, someone who understands these remote monitoring systems to make sure it's adequate.
My sense is it might be actually be the fire marshal's department.
Okay, that might work. Yeah, sure.
Okay, so we'll add by fire marshal.
But I would also add or the appropriate
or town engineer
or the appropriate town staff.
Okay. Number 7, the applicant shall provide a 5-year monitoring period for plants within the upland review areas and wetlands. And upon 1 year from the completion of installation, supply annual reports to be filed to the wetlands agent, identifying equivalent replacements due to loss of initial plant materials. Filed with the wetlands agent. It's a very minor thing. Sorry.
Easiest one for tonight. It's the easiest one tonight. But that also was somewhat talked about by you guys, and then also Michael Klein had recommended the ongoing you want, if you are going to do mitigation planting, you want it to survive, and also your permit is good for 5 years, so 5 years seems appropriate. That anything that dies or needs to be replaced or just doesn't make it, it is replaced. You can tweak the wording on that, but I just
Katie Owsley, for the record, I think it just does need to say, it says identifying equivalent replacement, but maybe it needs to say identifying and replacing equivalent. Or I'm sorry, identifying and purchasing equivalent replacements.
I get new pages in here. There's
Yeah, there's some action.
Yes, yeah.
Can you do that for me?
Dan?
Yes.
So
sorry,
Beth
so
Sanford for the record. Kathleen, I don't know if this would be the right spot, but also Michael was talking about the soil that they're going to plant around the bridge, talking about having it done under the wetland scientist.
yes, you did.
Would that be encompassed in this?
I would put that on as a separate item because it's a separate area. It is a separate area, and I believe you can refresh my memory, but I believe he was talking about that it shall be done under the shall be monitored for the placement of the soil.
Yeah, and the stabilization with the wetland seed mix.
Can you read me that, and then you can decide?
It's his oral testimony, so it's a little bit placing fill into the wetlands with soil to abate the flow of this on the side of the retaining wall. Not the best idea, but if it's to be done, to be carefully under the supervision of a wetlands scientist and stabilized with a wetlands seed mix.
that sounds like, this is Angela Jameson for the record. That sounds like a useful additional special comment, condition to me.
Yeah. Beth Sanford with a question. I think it was Michael also who talked about, if there's an issue with the wetlands and mitigation, remediation is required, they would have, that would be included regardless, right? That's endemic to the what we do.
Yes. And sorry, so supervision of a wetland scientist, and then you said something about soil mix or seed mix.
Sorry, I just scrolled away from that. 1 sec. Stabilization with a wetlands seed mix. So that all should be done. Yeah, I guess the planting of the seed mix that goes into the soil that they're planting, they're bringing in to fill that area, should be all done under a wetland scientist.
Kathleen, it would be helpful if you would scroll down to that so we can see what you're typing in.
Actually, Pete, unfortunately,
I
am
we're not typing.
trapped at the front table, and I'd have to the back table. I have not been able to make the edits as
okay. You're okay.
Yeah, so I'm sorry, and this would be a new condition.
Right.
So unfortunately, we've abandoned our best laid plans to try to get the words that we may take a break.
I think Priscilla had a comment.
I have a question about the Priscilla Weinke for the record. Again, the grass on top of the
green roof.
Of the green roof. Yeah. If that dies, is he going to continue? Is this going to be taken care of too in this particular little in number 7?
Well, my recollection of the plan and their testimony was that it would be maintained and
in the same manner
function. But if you feel you want to add something in that regard,
well, you could just include it in all the other places that I suppose it could be included. Where things might die, plants or grass.
So moving on to number 8. The applicant shall remove all excess snow to a legal location that is not able to be contained in the designated snow stockpile area on the site. I think that to a legal location should come at the end there. Sorry. I mean, it didn't make a lot of sense as I read it.
Okay.
No, you're right.
Through the way I kind of, because I was stumbling through
okay,
it.
So this goes to the end.
Yeah. Because that is not able to be contained qualifies the snow, excess snow, not the legal location. So, I mean, this wasn't an issue that there was a lot of concern expressed about. You know, there were a lot of question marks about why these 15 parking spaces was the correct number to earmark for snow retention during snowstorms. A lot of concern that, well, what if cars are parked there? What's going to happen? And if those 15 spaces or however many are actually available and are not enough, what happens to the excess snow? Does it just kind of get pushed off into the wetlands? Anything that needs to be added to that?
I'd like to go back to Priscilla's comment, and I found a spot to add it.
Good.
Under number 7, the applicant shall provide a 5-year monitoring period for plants within the upland review areas and the wetlands and upon. You could say including the green roof infrastructure, if that's what everyone would like to do.
Sure.
Can we just check in with Dan, because I'm wondering if he's having some issues. Dan, are you able to hear me?
You can speak.
Yes, I am.
Okay.
But what I can't do, I can't scroll down. For some reason, I'm still in number 6, but I can't scroll down the screen. So I'm looking at the
Oh, that's no
Dan,
one can scroll
no one
down,
can.
Dan, because
Dan,
This is George, Dan. That's up to the person sharing the screen to scroll down. You can't do it.
So
there.
Beth Sanford
I'm
has
sorry, I
moved
was
to the
trying
back
to-
of the room and
I'm
is going
sorry.
to try to
Okay.
scroll down.
Beth, make sure you jog back.
Just don't disconnect us. I'm trusting you, Beth.
Don't delete.
Oh,
Whoa.
There we go.
Oh,
Good.
perfect.
Oh, okay. Very good. Gotcha. Yeah, can you hear me, Kathleen?
Yes.
Okay.
So are there any other special conditions that commissioners would like to have considered?
Well, I have some radical ones. I'll just throw them out.
Good.
You can throw them right back at me if you want. First is make sure they cut no trees in the wetlands and setback, okay? And I don't think they're going to do that, but I think I'd like to have trees standing, and I'd like to not have any trees cut in the wetlands. I don't know if they're going to plan on doing that, but they may later on.
But Dan, they're going to cut down an awful lot of trees in the upland review area because otherwise they won't be able to build the residential development. Or
Right.
excavate.
I think he meant the well.
So that is part and parcel of this application and it always has been. So I think maybe the condition needs to really just address, no cutting of trees in the wetlands, which they shouldn't do anyway. They should come back and get a permit for that.
They are not indicating any trees to be removed. It's already on the plan.
Yeah, and Kathleen, that's a point. There should be a condition added that states strict compliance with the plans that were submitted. They should be, you can identify those plans through the title on the title block, A1, A2, A3, whatever they're designated, but strict compliance with all of those plans should be a condition of the approval.
That's a good point, Pete. And number one, the first special condition, if we kind of did that pretty quickly, the number one is, again, this came out of the discussion, also came out of the peer reviewers. The applicant shall supply one complete set of all approved record drawings signed and sealed to the Inland Wetlands Office within 30 days of the recording of the wetland permit on the land records. So that becomes the working document and will reflect strict compliance. But I think adding that towards number one or two, actually number one, that should be number one, strict compliance.
Yeah.
That should be number one.
Yep.
Good idea.
Yep.
Kathleen, can you just remind me, this is a 50-foot setback, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
That's much, and this is Angela Jameson for the record, that is much smaller than many surrounding towns have.
I know.
Footstep.
It has to include the setback too. That's what I'm saying.
What, the tree cutting?
Yes, I don't.
Oh no, because that's in the plan. That's in the plan. They're cutting trees in this in the setback area.
I think we should change it, quite frankly.
You do? Okay. Well,
I do. Yeah.
I just think that it's the project is contingent on them cutting the trees in the setback.
Absolutely.
It is? Okay.
Yeah, and the stormwater retention system.
Yeah.
Yeah, and keep in mind, Dan, that it's not a setback. It's simply an upland review area.
Right.
And any activity, whether it's in the wetlands, whether it's in the upland review area, or whether it's outside of the upland review areas within your jurisdiction, if it has an adverse impact on wetlands and watercourses. So it's really just adds an area that is considered to be a regulated area. That's
okay.
all.
Okay.
This covers it.
Yeah. Dan, have you got other suggestions?
Let me read this here, just a minute.
The icing.
No, I guess
Well, let me throw a question out here. Are we comfortable that there's enough in here about the use of environmentally friendly de-icing agents?
Yeah, that's Sanford. I think we need to specify the de-icing elements. And again, I don't know what the monitoring, the compliance.
Well,
that would be.
This is Angela Jameson for the record. That's always a tough one because there's, what's specified and then there's what actually happens when the poor guy that has to get rid of the snow and the ice, as cars are trying to come down that driveway and cars are trying to go up and pedestrians are trying to walk up and down and get to their parked vehicles. What's that guy going to do? He's going to be under a lot of stress.
That's true.
I guess you could elaborate number 8 if you felt that was the right spot to do something. And I would just, go back to expert testimony that you heard and whether or not you actually heard affirmative concerns in relationship to an impact on or an adverse impact on wetlands with
the de-icing,
with de-icing or litter for that matter, or whatever else that I'm not sure if you did. So it's Beth, so the de-icing part, what do you recollect? Can you, I know you.
Yeah, I was just looking to see if
I thought the applicant agreed to what the scientists recommended.
This is George Perkins for the record. Is there a standard that the town uses for snow removal? And so would that play into this in terms of plowing?
The town uses rock salt, street salt. But I don't know. I just don't think that you should use it. I think we have to limit it to maybe something natural like salt or nothing with chemical, I guess. Because
there was a particular chemical mentioned as being environmentally friendly. And it's something like AME, ACE.
Yeah, which they agreed to Katie's point.
They've agreed to.
So I think we just put that in. We should just put that in, and it's not going to be, unfortunately, it's not going to be complied with in the next after 2 years.
Number 1 says the additional special condition that we just talked about, strict compliance with the plans shall be imperative. That's what I wrote. That means everything. So if they've already agreed to do the alternative thing, it's boots and suspenders, but you have 5 years to monitor all of these types of things.
Yep.
I always say there's one of me, but I've got 30,000 agents out there watching stuff. So,
what about litter? Do we need to put anything in there about clearing litter that somehow manages to find its way into the wetlands?
Like put it into the
I'm not sure it's appropriate because it's some of their elements of their stormwater management system do have mechanisms for dropping out. They have extra deep sumps to get some of the litter into those basins and whatnot. But I don't know. I know litter's a tough one.
Well, we've seen what's happened to the perimeter of those wetlands over the years with littering, and that was long before 72 Hill Street LLC owned this piece of property. It predates that.
So actually, just remind me, the other permit that is in play and enforceable requires the current applicant to remove all the litter that has been discarded. So you will be getting a litter cleanup of farm equipment or whatever else is in the woodlands. It's pretty specific on the plans, as I recollect from 2000 and whatever. So you do have that already included. Going forward, I don't know, it's trying to require litter cleanup into the future. I'm not certain that I get where you're coming from. We don't want the wetlands to be trashed. I understand that.
And, you know, 93 households living there, plus visitors. You know, something like clean your mile, you know, once a year.
They'll be included in your mile.
Can we make that a condition?
I'm not certain.
Okay.
I'm not certain. You know.
That's Sanford for the record. Back to the de-icing. I'm just looking at what Michael Klein said during the testimony, which is that, you know, they should use an environmentally friendly de-icer, and that we should. My suggestion is the applicant provides you some specific programs to make sure that happens. So maybe specifying.
They
specified what they were going to use, right?
They did.
Is it written down?
Oh, yeah.
Have the plan? Yeah, okay.
It is in there.
Okay. Anything else anybody wants to add? The litter didn't seem to gain much traction.
So I think I'm up to 9, 10, possibly.
I got 11.
Kathleen, you didn't add in about not cutting trees and
Because it's already,
Okay.
I think strict compliance with the plan shall be imperative covers.
And that's going under 1.
That's number 1.
Okay, so
that's
the
number 1.
The 2 additional ones that they're quite new that I noted down was.
They go back to the back of the room and try.
Well, I wanted to. Well, hang on a minute. Was plantings under the bridge, monitored for placing soil in the wetlands under supervision of a soil scientist, stabilized with a wetland seed mix. That's a new one.
Yep.
And then the other new one is specify environmentally friendly de-icing agent used. But then I think we said that's already in the plan. So then the only other thing was strict compliance with the plan submitted, and you're going to put that under number 1.
And a second sentence to number 5 to require the applicant, you know, to return, or the town attorney to review with the Inland Wetlands Commission. They're going to be approving the final covenant that is prior to being recorded.
Kathleen, somebody wants to come in.
No, I agree, Beth. This is George. On the covenant, that it would be approved by the Inland Wetlands Commission.
So you think you've got all the additional things? There was I'm sorry, let's just kind of go over.
For number 1.
Okay, it was 150% of the estimated cost of the work for the bonding.
Yes.
No, and where it says the maintenance going over the wall by a ladder shall only be done by hand or by hand tools.
Yes.
Yep, I have that.
And so then number 5, that was going to require that the agreement is approved by the Inland Wetlands Commission as well as by the town attorney.
Yes.
And then number 6, the remote monitoring system needs to be approved by the fire marshals or appropriate town staff.
Yep.
Okay, so very shortly, I'm going to propose that we take a short break. But before we do that, I would just like to talk about process, because if there were a clear majority in favor of approving this application, it would make perfect sense for us to take a pause for, say, 10, 20 minutes, however long Kathleen needs, to revise the draft resolution. However, I'm kind of loath to ask her to do that work if actually it's clear at this juncture that we're not going to approve the application. And again, going back to the straw poll we just had, We had one approval with stringent conditions. We had 4 commissioners in the deny approval camp, and we had 2 on the fence. Does anyone want to change where they are in that straw poll?
I do.
Now, this is George Perkins for the record. No, at this point, I don't want to change. The one thing that we should be very cognizant of is there enough definition of the damage to the wetlands to deny this application? Again, I went through the entire readings, and I didn't see any instance of a specific harm coming to the wetlands. For example, damage to the root structure of trees, scum on top of the water that would just different things. They all said it would have significant damage, but the damage is not defined, and that's the only. My only concern at this point is if we do manage, if we do deny it, we have to make sure that we are pretty well bulletproof on the appeal.
Okay, well, thank you, Commissioner Perkins, for that. And correct me if I'm wrong. I had you marked down as being on the fence. Is that correct? And is it
you can keep me on the fence.
Okay.
At this point, but right now,
everyone is entitled to be on the fence, but it's not the most helpful place to be right now. But that is where you are. That is where you are.
He sounds more like a yes.
Yeah, he said no.
He said no to begin with. Yep.
But then he just
So, George, could you just clarify whether you're approved, deny, or on the fence?
I am currently on deny.
And why?
Deny.
Why?
Deny.
That's where he started, Angela.
I'm sorry?
That's where he started.
Well, I kind of put
today.
him.
Yes, today he did.
No, he said seriously, he was leaning towards approval. We're now seriously considering voting against.
Yeah, Anthony and I think we're the 2 on the fence, technically.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. Okay, so on the fence, I'm going to write this down as Anthony and Katie.
I just leapt off the fence, so I'm in the no camp now.
You're in the no camp.
Yes.
Okay, I'm going to. Okay, just give me a.
And George, I just wanted to say, it's Katie Owsley for the record. I struggle with the same thing that you just articulated, and where I think Dan said something earlier, which had him thinking that he would vote yes, which he said that the peer reviewer said if done rightly, that there would be no adverse impacts. And I think where I come down now is it isn't just a question of constructed rightly. It means done rightly, but there's so little room for there's so little margin of error that would have to include no unanticipated storms and no unanticipated findings on the site or anything unexpected. I feel like could derail the peer reviewers' confidence in how it would perform. So I am a deny.
Okay, so what I've got so far, approval with stringent conditions, Dan Stepanek, deny, Beth Sanford, George Perkins, Priscilla Woike, Angela Jameson. That's 4 commission members. On the fence, Anthony Sillo and Katie Owsley.
No,
I'm sorry, I got this wrong again, haven't I? So now we got 5 to deny: Angela, Beth, George, Priscilla, and Katie. We have Anthony on the fence, and we have Dan Stepanek would like to approve with stringent conditions. So on the basis of that straw poll, do we want to ask Kathleen to redraft this draft resolution with special conditions?
Well, I'm going to have to draft a resolution. So I need guidance on voting no.
Yeah, there are no conditions to vote no. And I think it's incumbent on the members of the commission who want to deny this to come up with the specific reasons for denial. what specific evidence in the record supports their decision. I think it's incumbent on whoever wants to deny the application to come up with those specific reasons.
That's based on Anthony Sillo, just asking. That's based on the facts presented to us throughout all these meetings, right?
That's the record, yeah.
And the expert testimony.
That's the record, correct.
Okay.
So they're
commissions, if denied, this commission has to come up with specific reasons in the record why we are denying it.
Correct. We have to come up with substantial evidence of a adverse impact to the wetlands. An adverse impact and is something that, well, substantial evidence of adverse impact is something that needs to be supplied to the commission by experts. So that simply means that anybody who wants to deny it needs to go through the record and come up with expert testimony that supports that decision.
Wow.
If you want the decision to be upheld by in an appeal.
Okay.
And I assume you do.
So do any of the commission members feel are any of the commission members in a position to outline, perhaps after a break, the specific reasons why they are voting to deny?
Angela, you may not be able to do that over the course of a break. I think.
No,
it's almost.
No, I mean the break is for other reasons. To be quite
but to have a vote has sufficient reasons in it tonight is probably not a great idea. I think that the people who are opposed to the application should provide Kathleen with their specific reasons and the substantial evidence that supports the denial. And then you'll have to probably have another special meeting to approve that or to vote on that. So that's just about what has to be done here is I don't think Kathleen can determine for the commission what those reasons are. So they need to supply them to her. It can't be done tonight.
Right. So we do actually have a special meeting that's scheduled for Wednesday evening. And that's pretty much the last date we can do this because we have commission members who are going to be going on vacation the very next day. So do those who are minded to deny the application feel that they can provide Kathleen Holland tomorrow with their reasons for denying it?
I don't think we have much choice.
It is what it is.
Yep. Okay.
Well, this is George for the record. This has been a long and kind of torturous type of thing, and again, I'm very concerned about being over about the appeal. So I'm pretty much back on the fence, and I'm going to go through this. And if I can't find it, if I can't quantify my reasons, then
okay. So now we have
then we're going to be taking another vote.
Okay, we'll have a break in a minute, Anthony. So George is out of the no camp and back on the fence.
I'm back on the fence. On the fence again. You know,
on the fence again. So the four remaining folks that are leaning towards a denial: Angela, Beth, Priscilla, and Katie. Can we provide Kathleen with our reasons for denying tomorrow? Yep. Priscilla?
Reasons supported by the record.
Reasons supported by the record. Okay.
Expert testimony, substantial evidence is what I mean.
Yep.
It's a pretty high bar. So.
Okay, and then I guess the next step would be for Kathleen quickly to draft a resolution for us to go over and discuss on Wednesday evening. maybe at the same time, we ought to have the beefed up special conditions.
Sure.
Yes, and then you can have a vote on
I'm so
one.
sorry, Kathleen, but it just seems to me that there isn't sufficient clarity here about how folks are going to actually vote at the end of the day.
Yeah, I can do that.
Does that make?
I'll do my best.
Does that make sense?
It does.
Yep.
Do my, yeah.
Get them to as quickly as possible.
Right. Okay. So do we want to take a short break, or do we want to, or is this kind of getting towards being a wrap?
I think you're at a wrap.
We're done
So
for tonight.
You're done for tonight.
Okay, so
Need to
four
get some
commission
rest.
members have homework assignments, and
You don't have it written.
well, I just suggest everybody thinks, carefully over this this application. George was absolutely right when he said it's been a real torturous path, very complicated. So I want to thank everyone for paying so much careful attention through all these weeks of expert testimony and listening to the public. Does anybody want to raise anything else? So we'll meet back here or via Zoom at 6 p.m. on Wednesday, the 22nd of March. Still in March. If nobody's got anything else that they want to raise or discuss, could I hear a motion to adjourn, please? Thank you, Priscilla. Seconded by, and I'll second that, Angela. All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Any against?